AITA for telling my boyfriend he never actually broke up with his ex? My name is Raya, and I'm 24. A few months ago, I started spending time with someone named Juan, who's 26. We met at a friend's birthday dinner, one of those loud, crowded nights filled with laughter, spilled drinks, and off-key karaoke. We happened to sit next to each other, and within minutes, we were sharing stories, trading jokes, and laughing like we'd known each other for years. There was no tension, no pressure, just that easy, unspoken connection that feels rare. From the beginning, we were honest. Neither of us wanted a serious relationship. We said we'd keep things light, friends who occasionally blurred the line between platonic and something more. No promises, no expectations. It sounded safe, even mature. I told myself I could handle it. But one had just come out of a long relationship with someone named Louisa. 6 years. That's almost a lifetime in your 20s. When he told me that, I felt a flicker of hesitation, a quiet warning deep in my gut. But he said it was over, that they were done, and that the only reason they still lived together was financial. Just until the lease is up, he said, then we're going our separate ways. At first, I believed him. I wanted to. I knew how messy breakups could be, how hard it was to let go of routines and shared lives. So I gave him space. I didn't ask too many questions. I told myself it was fine. But over time, things started to feel off. Every time we met, at the park, at my apartment, even during a quick lunch, his phone never stopped buzzing. And every time, it was Louisa. The texts were constant. Can you talk? I'm having a bad day. Or, please don't stay out too late. I can't sleep when you're not home. At first, I ignored it. Then I noticed how he'd look at his phone, sigh, and text back immediately. Sometimes, he'd even answer her calls right in front of me. Once, he left in the middle of dinner because Louisa said she was having a panic attack. I remember sitting alone at the restaurant table, staring at the untouched food, my heart sinking lower than I wanted to admit. Later, when I asked him about it, he just said, I can't ignore her when she's like that. You don't understand what she's been through. That became his line for everything. What I didn't expect was how tangled their lives still were. Louisa wasn't just an ex. She was still there. She did his laundry sometimes. They shopped for groceries together. He told me they didn't have separate rooms because rent was too high. I asked if that meant they still shared a bed, and after a long pause, he said yes, but only for sleeping. My chest went cold. He promised there was no intimacy, that it was just temporary. But how temporary can something be when you're still making coffee together every morning and calling each other roommate instead of ex? The more time I spent around him, the more I realized Louisa was still everywhere. In his car, in his apartment, even in his words. He'd say we when talking about plans, then correct himself. He once told me she still made dinner for him sometimes because she enjoys cooking for two. It didn't take long before her name became the ghost that followed us everywhere. The breaking point came one night when he invited me over for a movie. I brought snacks. We picked something mindless to watch, and for a while, it felt normal, almost cozy. But then, halfway through, the front door opened and Louisa walked in. She froze when she saw me on the couch. He froze too. The silence was thick enough to choke on. She said, "You didn't tell me someone was coming over." He replied quietly, "I didn't think I had to." She gave a tight smile, looked at me, and said, "Oh, so this is her." It wasn't a question. She dropped her bag and walked straight to their shared bedroom, slamming the door. The rest of the night was unbearable. I left before the movie ended, my chest aching with humiliation. Later, he called and said, "She's just emotional. She'll calm down." But she didn't. The next time we saw each other, he told me Louisa had written out a list of rules for him. Real, actual rules. He wasn't supposed to spend more than 2 nights a week with me. He wasn't allowed to post photos of us. He wasn't even supposed to sleep over because, in her words, it would hurt too much. That was when I lost it. I said, "Juan, this isn't healthy. You're letting your ex control your life." He looked at me like I'd insulted him. "Raya, she's not controlling me. She's just struggling. I can't abandon her when she's like this." I wanted to scream. Instead, I said quietly, "You already left her, Juan. You just forgot to stop living like you're still together." He didn't answer. We didn't speak for a few days after that. When we finally did, it was a fight. A long, raw argument where every buried frustration came out. He said I didn't understand loyalty. I said he didn't understand boundaries. He said I was making him choose. I said he already had. He just wouldn't admit it. The night ended with him slamming the door. I sat on my kitchen floor afterward, shaking, trying not to cry. Still, I didn't block him. I told myself maybe things would change, that once Louisa moved out, he'd finally be free. But deep down, I knew the truth. He didn't want to be free. He needed to feel needed. He didn't know who he was without someone depending on him. Weeks passed like that. He'd text me, saying he missed me, then disappear when Louisa Louisa had another bad day. Once, he even sent me a photo of the dinner she'd cooked for him, captioned, "She's trying to move on." I didn't reply. Then, about 3 weeks later, I got a text from him. It was simple. "Can we talk? Just once, please." I stared at the message for almost an hour before replying. My hands were trembling even as I typed. "What do you want to talk about?" He responded right away. "Louisa moved out. I just want to say I'm sorry. Can we meet?" I told myself I'd go, not because I wanted him back, but because I needed closure. I wanted to look him in the eyes and see for myself if he had finally let go of the chaos that had been swallowing him. We met at a quiet cafe near the train station, one of those little places that smell like burnt espresso and cinnamon. When I walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. One looked thinner, tired, older somehow. His eyes had that kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from carrying too much for too long. He smiled when he saw me, small, cautious, almost guilty. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," I replied. We sat across from each other, two people who once couldn't stop talking but now didn't know how to start. "Finally," he said, "I owe you an apology." I didn't say anything. I just waited. He took a long breath before speaking. "After you left, everything fell apart. Louisa didn't take it well. The day you walked away, she broke down completely. She said she couldn't live without me, that she was thinking of leaving town, maybe even doing something drastic." His voice cracked at that part, and I could see him fighting back emotion. He told me that for weeks, she called him every night, sometimes crying, sometimes screaming, sometimes just sitting in silence on the phone. She showed up at his workplace once, begging him not to replace her. He said she even emailed his boss, claiming he was being inappropriate with a coworker, which almost got him written up. "That was the moment I realized," he said, staring down at his coffee. "I wasn't helping her. I was keeping her stuck. And I was stuck too." He looked up at me then, eyes glassy. "I'm so sorry for everything I put you through. You didn't deserve to be pulled into that." And I believed him. I really did. But I couldn't forget how many nights I had sat awake, waiting for a message that never came because he was too busy comforting someone else. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing the edge of my hand. "Can we start over? No pressure, no promises, just dinner." As two people who once cared about each other, I stared at his hand for a long moment. I thought about all the things I missed, the way he laughed, the warmth in his voice when he called me Raya, the little ways he made me feel seen. But I also thought about the tension, the doubt, the feeling of being second place in someone else's life. I pulled my hand back gently. "Juan," I said quietly, "I think you need to figure out who you are without anyone depending on you, including me." He blinked, and I saw his throat tighten. "You're probably right," he whispered. We sat there for a few more minutes, both silent, until he stood up. "Take care of yourself, Raya." "You too," I said. And that was it. That was the last time I saw him. But the story didn't end there, not completely. A week later, he sent one last message. It was long, almost like a confession. He said Louisa had been struggling more than he realized, and that he finally convinced her to see a therapist. He'd moved into a small apartment by himself, bare walls and mismatched furniture, he said, but the quiet finally feels right. He thanked me for helping him see what he couldn't when he was lost in it. Then he wrote, "I'll always care about you, but I understand if you don't want to talk anymore." I never replied. I typed out so many drafts, kind ones, angry ones, confused ones, but none of them felt right. So I let it be. The end. "Raya, you're not the AITA, not even close. You were just trying to have something simple, something light, and somehow got drafted into a love triangle that looked more like a soap opera with bad light. You didn't sign up to play emotional therapist to a guy who was still basically living with his ex, spiritually and physically. One meant well, but meant well doesn't make it okay." He tried to act like he was helping Louisa heal, but really, he was just keeping both of them trapped in the same emotional hamster wheel. You were the only one who realized how strange it was to date someone who still shares a bed with their roommate. That's not modern love. That's a bad sitcom pilot. You showed empathy when most people would have flipped the table. You gave him patience, space, and understanding, even when the situation was ridiculous. The problem wasn't your kindness. It was his inability to let go of the past. He wasn't ready for new love. He was just trying to soothe old guilt. You did the right thing walking away. You didn't know him your piece, so he could keep pretending he was everyone's hero. And that cafe scene, that was pure closure. Calm, honest, final. You didn't blow up. You didn't chase answers. You just said what needed to be said and left the rest to time. That's not weakness. That's growth. So yeah, you're not the AITA. You were the clear-headed one in a foggy mess. You didn't ruin anything. You just refused to keep pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Before we jump into the next story, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know your favorite part in the comments. AITA for not wanting to be around my brother's kids, even though it hurt my family? My name is True, and I'm 28. My older brother, Alec, is 31, and he and his wife, Genevieve, have 2 young kids, a 4-year-old named Edison and a baby girl named Deborah who just turned 7 months. To be completely honest, I've never been comfortable around children. I don't hate them, but I also don't enjoy being around them. I get overwhelmed easily, and I've always struggled with noise, mess, and unpredictable energy, all things that seem to come naturally with kids. Alec, on the other hand, has always been family-oriented. He loves being a dad, and I admire that. He and Genevieve talk about their kids constantly, post pictures every day, and invite everyone over for playdates or family dinners. And every time, I try my best to be polite and supportive. But the truth is, I'd rather not be there. I've tried explaining this before, gently, at first. I told Alec that while I love him, I don't have the same connection to his kids that he does, and I'd prefer to keep my distance. But he took it as an insult. He told me I was being cold and selfish. Genevieve later texted me saying I was hurting the family dynamic. It's not that I wish them harm. I even send birthday gifts and cards. But every time I'm invited over, it feels like I'm being asked to play a role I don't fit into. Genevieve always tries to hand me the baby, even when I politely refuse. And when Edison starts crying or throwing toys, she laughs and says he just misses his Aunt True. The last time I visited, things got tense. We were at their house for Sunday lunch, and Genevieve kept asking if I wanted to help feed the baby. I said, no, I'm fine just sitting here. She kept pushing, smiling like she thought I was joking. When she finally placed Deborah in my lap without asking, I froze. The baby started crying almost immediately, and I panicked. Alex sighed and said, True, it wouldn't kill you to try. I felt my chest tighten. I stood up, gently handed Deborah back, and said, I didn't come here to be tested. Then I left. Later that night, Alec called me. He sounded angry. He said, you can't keep running away from family. They're your niece and nephew. They'll notice when you're not around. I told him, as calmly as I could, I'm not running away. I'm just not the kind of person who thrives in chaos. He hung up without saying goodbye. After that, silence. Weeks of it. The kind of silence that fills up your phone screen and your mind. My mom tried to play peacekeeper, sending me screenshots of family photos, telling me how sweet the kids look, hoping I'd soften. But it only made me feel smaller, like I was the cold outsider they whispered about when I wasn't there. Genevieve eventually unfollowed me on social media. I noticed when a friend tagged her in a photo, her account was gone from my feed. It hurt more than I expected. I hadn't realized how much I cared until I saw the missing name. Still, I didn't reach out. Every text I thought about sending felt forced. I didn't want to apologize for being who I was. Then one evening, my mother called. Her tone was sharp and tired. True, you need to stop this. Alec thinks you don't care about his family. Genevieve's feelings are hurt. I bit back my words. Mom, I do care, but I don't need to be part of every dinner, every meltdown, every moment. I'm not wired for that. You sound selfish, she said. That word again. Selfish. It sat like a stone in my stomach. I hung up early that night, and afterward, I cried, not because I felt guilty, but because it felt impossible to be understood. A week later, Alex sent me a message. Just one line. Edison keeps asking why Aunt True doesn't visit. That broke me a little. I didn't know what to say. I stared at the message for an hour before typing back, because sometimes adults need space, too. Then I deleted it. I never sent a reply. The next time I saw them was at my mom's birthday dinner. I hadn't planned on staying long, but I wanted to show up for her. The second I walked in, Edison ran to Alec, hiding behind his leg. Genevieve smiled politely, but didn't say much. The air was heavy, like everyone was waiting for someone to explode. Dinner started off fine. Small talk, laughter that didn't quite reach our eyes. But halfway through, Genevieve looked up and said, True, would you mind holding Deborah while I grab something from the kitchen? I hesitated. My hands tightened around my fork. I think she's fine where she is, I said softly. She smiled, but her eyes were sharp. It's okay, she won't bite. Alex shot her a look, but she kept going. You know, you'd probably like being around them more if you just tried. I felt everyone watching me. My mom, my dad, even little Edison staring up, confused. Finally, I said, you keep saying that like it's a choice, but it's not about trying. I'm just not comfortable, and I wish you'd stop pushing me. Genevieve's expression fell, and Alex's fork clattered against his plate. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Then Alex said quietly, you make it sound like they're a burden. I swallowed hard. No, I just know I'm not the person you want me to be. After dinner, I left without saying goodbye. My mother called again later that night, her voice trembling. Why can't you just go along with things for once? You're tearing this family apart. That hurt more than anything Genevieve or Alec had said, because I wasn't trying to cause damage. I was just trying to exist without being dragged into something I couldn't handle. It's been 2 months since that argument, and a lot has changed. Some of it good, some of it confusing, and some of it heavier than I ever expected. After that night, when Alec hung up on me, I went through weeks of silence. Not the kind of silence that feels peaceful, the kind that hums in the background of every day, reminding you that something is broken. Every family dinner invitation disappeared. Every group message went quiet. Even my mother mother stopped mentioning their names, like she was afraid to stir anything up. At first, I thought maybe it was better that way. Distance meant calm, but as time passed, that calm started to ache. Every time I saw a photo of Alec and his kids pop up on someone else's social media, a dull guilt settled in my chest. It wasn't jealousy. It was this strange mixture of missing him and knowing that if I tried to reach out, it would only cause another storm. Then, out of nowhere, one Thursday evening, I got a text from Alec. It was simple. "Can we talk?" I stared at my phone for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part, the part that still remembered sitting on the porch as kids, eating popsicles and laughing about nothing, told me to say yes. So I did. We agreed to meet at a small cafe near our old neighborhood, the place we used to go with our parents when life was simple, when we didn't know what resentment or exhaustion felt like. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. Alec used to have this steady, confident energy, but now his shoulders were slouched, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. He looked older, not in years, but in weight. He sat down, and before I could even open my mouth, he said quietly, "True, I owe you an apology." It caught me off guard. Alec never apologized easily. He was the type to hold his ground until someone else caved. I didn't say anything. I just waited. He took a deep breath. "After that fight, things at home got bad. Genevieve's been struggling more than I realized. She's been different, snapping over little things, crying out of nowhere. And I've been stretched thin between work, the kids, and trying to keep everything together." He rubbed his face with his hands. "I used to think you were selfish, that you just didn't want to be part of the family. But now, I get it. You were setting limits before you broke. I wish I'd done the same." My throat felt tight. "Alec," he shook his head. "No, let me finish. Genevieve's been dealing with postpartum depression. I didn't see it at first. I just thought she was tired. But it's been hard for all of us. I think when you started pulling away, she felt abandoned. Not just by you, by everyone. So she tried to force you in closer. She didn't mean to hurt you. She just wanted help." I sat there, stunned. Suddenly, all those tense dinners, the guilt trips, the forced smiles, they made sense. Genevieve wasn't being cruel. She was drowning, and I hadn't realized it. I felt this wave of sadness wash over me. Not guilt exactly, but something close. "I didn't know," I whispered. "If I had," he cut me off gently. "You couldn't have known. I didn't even know. But I want us to be okay again. I miss my sister." For a long time, neither of us said anything. Then I said softly, "I miss you too, Alec. But I can't promise I'll ever be the kind of aunt you expect. I can visit, I can love your kids from a distance, but I can't force myself into something that makes me anxious." He nodded slowly. "That's okay. I just want you to be around in whatever way you can." We stayed at that cafe for nearly 3 hours. The conversation started heavy but ended lighter, warmer. We laughed about small things, about how Edison refuses to eat anything green, about how Deborah's first word might actually be dog. When we finally stood to leave, Alec hugged me tightly. It wasn't awkward or stiff like before. It felt real, forgiving. That night, I thought about Genevieve. I didn't expect to hear from her, but a few days later, she texted. The message was short but heavy with sincerity. "I'm sorry for pushing you. I didn't realize how much I was struggling. I wanted help and didn't know how to ask for it. Thank you for still caring, even when it didn't look like it." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I wrote back, "I understand. I hope things get better, and I'm here, just maybe not in the way you expect." And surprisingly, she replied with just one word. "That's enough." It was the kind of message that ended a war quietly. A week later, Alec invited me over. I almost said no out of habit, but something in me said it was time to try again. When I arrived, Edison ran up to me, cautious at first, but smiling. "Aunt True," he said, waving his toy truck proudly. Deborah was in her playpen, cooing softly. Genevieve smiled when she saw me. A real, tired, but genuine smile. The end. Nah, you're not the AITA, man. You just hit that point where protecting your peace mattered more than pretending everything was fine. People love to say family is everything, but they forget that respect is part of that deal too. You weren't being cold. You were just tired of being the only one trying to keep things calm while everyone else brought drama to the table. You gave them chances, real ones. You showed up, stayed patient, and tried to talk things out like an adult, but they kept crossing lines, testing your patience, acting like your boundaries were optional. So when you finally said, "I'm done," that wasn't attitude. That was self-respect in motion. And yeah, maybe you could have worded things softer, but sometimes the truth doesn't fit in a polite tone. Sometimes you've got to say it raw so people hear you. You weren't trying to start a fight. You were ending one that's been dragging on for too long. The best part? You didn't get petty. You didn't air anyone out or throw shade online. You just stepped back, breathed, and chose quiet over chaos. That's growth right there. You didn't cut them off out of anger. You did it because peace isn't supposed to be earned through exhaustion. So no, you're not the AITA. You're the one who realized that peace of mind is a form of love too, just the kind that starts with you. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely want to check out AITA for wanting leave boyfriend because his daughter hated me. Click here to watch it now.